welcome to Guys, a video series talking about different types of baseball guys. In this episode, we're talking about weak guys. Now, obviously none of these guys are literally weak in any respect. They're all good players, and as professional athletes, I'm sure they're all very strong dudes. But what we're looking for are guys who have very little home run power. And specifically, I've chosen guys who all had at least one excellent season where they didn't hit a single home run. Before we get into it, I've got to talk about a few guys that are fun edge cases that I didn't put on the team. First, gotta mention Dwayne Kuiper, the great Giants announcer who had a 12-year run as a light-hitting second baseman and hit just one single home run in his career, off of fellow future broadcasting legend Steve Stone. In fact, Kuip holds the record for most at-bats with one or fewer home runs in the live ball era, with 3,379. What about the most ABs with 0 homers, though? Well, that's a guy named Tom Oliver with 1,931, who had a very unusual batting stance, facing directly at the pitcher with 1 foot behind the other. Yeah, I don't see how you'd ever go yard standing like that. Catcher, John Stearns. Stearns, nicknamed Bad Dude, broke into the double digits in homers a couple times in his career. But in 1980, he had a very productive partial season, posting 2.3 WAR in just 363 plate appearances while not going deep once. First base, Pete Rose. Let's go with the hit king at first, who was never known for his home run power, maxing out at 16 for a single season. In the strike-shortened 81 season, Pete recorded the most WAR in the live ball era for a first baseman with 0 home runs. It was only 1.7, but Pete's defense was to blame for dragging that number down. He still led the league in hits and slashed .325, .391, .390. Second base, Eddie Stanky. Eddie Stanky has shown up in the Name Guys episode and the On Base Guys episode, and he easily could have made it onto the Loose Cannons roster too. Just a real guys guy. Stanky had the best batting season using batting runs in the live ball era for a player with 0 homers. This was mainly due to his elite on-base skills, of course. He walked 137 times and on-based 436. Third base, Johnny Pesky. The only player I can think of to be the namesake of a pole. Johnny Pesky only hit 17 career homers, but I'm going to assume the vast majority were hit into that short porch right down the line in Fenway Park. Pesky had a 4.5 WAR season in 1947 with 0 dingers, playing short and third. Shortstop, Ozzie Smith. Gotta go with the Wizard at short. Ozzie was known as a glove-first player, the all-time leader in defensive WAR, but his offense did develop later in his career. And his 1987 is one of his best seasons despite never going deep. It's probably his most complete year where he was elite defensively and on the base paths as usual, but he was also very good with the bat, slashing .303, .392, .383. Left field, Richie Ashburn. Another tremendous all-around player with very little home run power, Ashburn never hit more than 7 homers in a season. And in 1957, he had a 5.4 WAR season hitting .297, .390, .364 with no dingers. And he can obviously play center field too. Center field, Lance Johnson. Another tremendous defender and base runner, this guy did hit double digits in homers once, but in 1993, he put up a goose egg yet still posted 6.1 WAR. He also stole 35 bases in 42 attempts and led the league with 14 triples. Right field, Matty Alou. Part of the biggest baseball family, Matty Alou is a rarity on this list as he wasn't a great fielder, but had a solid bat. His best year was a homerless year in 1968, the year of the pitcher, when he put up 5.4 WAR. DH, Luke Appling. A tremendous hitter who never hit for much home run power, even though he could amazingly go yard at age 75, Appling never topped 6 long balls in a season. In his homerless 1940 season, he slashed .348, .420, .442, and he was a solid defensive shortstop, so he gives us some more infield depth. Bench, second base, Rod Carew. Carew hit 14 homers a couple times in his career, but he was the quintessential singles hitter. In the live ball era, he ranks behind only Pete Rose, Derek Jeter, and Ichiro in singles. And among all members of the 3,000 hit club, including dead ballers, he ranks second lowest in extra base hits, just behind Ichiro. Carew had an incredible zero-homer year in 1972, posting 5.4 WAR and slashing .318, .369, .379. 1972 was an incredibly bad season for offensive numbers. In fact, it helped to usher in the DH in 1973. And Carew's .318 average was enough to lead the league that year. Second base, Willie Randolph. Randolph's a super underrated guy, and in my opinion, ought to be in the Hall of Fame. Dude is surrounded by Hall of Famers here. Randolph never hit double-digit homers, but only had one full season where he didn't hit any. His 1 year in Milwaukee in 1991, when he put up 4.3 WAR. Randolph was underrated due to his value coming from his defense, base running, and on-base skills. But in 1991, at age 36, Randolph was no longer elite in the field or on the base paths. But boy, could he still get on base, slashing .327, .424, .374. Utility man, Debs Garms. Elite name guy Debs Garms was a solid singles hitter who played second, third, and all three outfield positions. He had an excellent year in 1938, hitting .315, .371, .364 with no dingers. Your first thought is probably that Debs is a nickname, but it is his given name. Debs and his brother Burger Garms were named after famous American socialists Eugene V. Debs and Victor Burger. Willie Cam, third base. Willie Cam was an on-base savant who had the best ever season by WAR for a third baseman with no home runs. Cam was involved in a miscommunication play, which rivals the famous '62 Mets Yo La Tengo anecdote, which had featured our friend Richie Ashburn, by the way. While playing for the Indians, Cam was calling for a pop-up between third and home when the catcher, Frankie Pitlack, collided with him. Pitlack jumped up and yelled, "Didn't you hear me waving?" Outfield, Taffy Wright. Taft Wright had the 9th best season by batting runs for a non-homering player, with 16. And he did that as a part-time player, only playing about half the time. Wright was a pretty terrific hitter in his career with good doubles power but little home run power, despite being a bit of a lug. Wright's weight seems to have been a constant issue in his career, with coaches trying everything to get him to slim down, including having him run laps while wearing a rubber suit to try to sweat the pounds off. It didn't work though, and a sports writer would say, Wright is still built like a beer can. I feel bad for the guy who was dubbed by sports writers Round Man and Fat Wright. Not very creative fat guy nicknames.
Look, Fat, look, here's the deal.
So much abuse heaped on him seems to have affected his self-esteem, as Wright was quoted as saying, "I'm sure God never meant me to be a ball player. If he had, I wouldn't be built so close to the ground and always worrying about my weight and being muscle-bound." Second base, third base, Ron Hunt. Ron Hunt's 1972 is one of the strangest stat lines you'll see, which makes sense because Hunt was an odd player, the most elite hit-by-pitch merchant in baseball history. He's fourth all-time in hit-by-pitches in the live ball era, but he's only 42 behind the leader, Craig Biggio, in about half the plate appearances. He's the only player in the live ball era with more than 35 hit-by-pitches in a season, and he's way over 35, with 50 in 1971. But 72, he had a down year of getting plunked, with only a league-leading 26, which helped to boost his very good on-base percentage up to .363. And of course he had no homers, and he slugged under .300. Hunt had 531 plate appearances and only drove in 18 runs. Crazy. Obviously, once again, 1972 was a year when offense was way down, but
still nuts.
Outfield, Greg Gross. Gross was kind of a professional hitter type.
This is Greg Grice, inviting you to watch Jimmy Walker, Good Times on Channel 17, where it's one hit after another.
Who mostly played part-time or platoon roles since he couldn't hit lefties, but he did get 3 full starting seasons in Houston at the start of his career. He came in second in Rookie of the Year voting in '74 with 4.7 WAR, but no homers. But by far his best season. Catcher, Ellie Rodriguez. And for a backup catcher, we'll go with Ellie Rodriguez, who was a bit of a loose cannon, who had a decent homerless season in 1973, before losing his starting role to rookie Darrell Porter in his pre-glasses guy era. Rodriguez's biggest claim to fame, though, is his ongoing feud with fellow loose cannon Bill Lee, which culminated in Rodriguez knocking out 4 of the spaceman's teeth. Pitching staff. For the pitching staff, we'll invert this and go with guys who managed to be great pitchers while giving up a lot of home runs. Phil Niekro. In 1979, old guy Phil Niekro had what was the best season ever for a pitcher who allowed 40-plus homers. He allowed 41, but led the league in WAR at 7.4. Now, I know this is probably going to annoy a bunch of people, but I want to talk for a moment about the difference between Baseball Reference WAR and Fangraphs WAR. I can feel that dislike button being smashed as I speak. But real quick, Baseball Reference uses runs allowed per 9 as its base and then calculates in a bunch of other bullshit. Fangraphs, meanwhile, uses fielding independent pitching as its base. And Fangraphs is green. Very, very green. So with extreme cases like a lot of the guys on this roster, their Fangraphs WAR is much lower than their Baseball Reference WAR. Niekro's 1979, for example, is worth nearly half by F-WAR compared to B-WAR. Obviously, the high homer rate hurts him, and his walk rate was high while his strikeout rate was fairly low. That's all bad stuff for FIP. But as a knuckleballer, you'd expect him to be a bit wild, but live off of weak contact, which is probably why he had good results, but not great peripherals. FIP is a great way to strip away everything a pitcher doesn't control, like quality of defense, but it doesn't account for pitchers that get weak contact or a high percentage of ground balls. Anyway, this is just a lot of words to say that I'm going to keep using Baseball Reference WAR because I just don't like looking at all that green stuff. Back to old Phil. He led the league not just in Baseball Reference WAR, he led the league in almost everything that season. Wins, losses, starts, innings, batters faced, homers, walks, hit by pitches, and complete games. And he did it while looking incredibly old. He was 39. Bert Blyleven. Blyleven wasn't especially homer prone for most of his career, but for 2 years in the mid-80s, he was like a home run derby pitcher. Much of this, of course, was to do with pitching in the Homer Dome. In '86, he gave up the most home runs ever given up in a season with 50. He's the only 50-homer hurler in baseball history. And yet he was pretty good, with 4.2 WAR despite a 1.7 home run per 9. Robin Roberts. This is shaping up to be an excellent rotation with 3 Hall of Fame starters. Robin Roberts was one of the best pitchers of the 1950s, but he did it with a low strikeout rate and a high home run rate. But he basically never walked anyone. Roberts allowed the second most home runs all time with 505. And who gave up the most? Well, that's our number 4 starter, Jamie Moyer. Moyer gave up 522 home runs in 600 fewer innings than Robin Roberts. Moyer also tops the charts for home runs per 9 innings for pitchers with 30 or more WAR with 1.2. And tied with Moyer on that list is our 5th starter, Tim Wakefield. Wakefield had his second best season in 2005 while giving up 1.4 home runs per 9 innings and leading the league with 35 homers allowed. Another knuckleballer, so everything I said about Niekro applies here too. He doesn't get graded so well on the green site, but he got results by getting weak contact with a paltry 12% line drive rate. Bullpen. John Wyatt. In 1964 for the Kansas City A's, this guy gave up the most home runs ever for a full-time relief pitcher. 81 games, no starts, 128 innings, and a whopping 23 homers. He also didn't strike out a ton of guys, and he didn't avoid walks. And yet he put up 2.7 WAR. This is one where the green site is probably more correct in that it rates this year at negative 1.3 WAR. But looking at results, Wyatt did get the job done, with a solid 3.59 ERA despite a bad 5.03 FIP. We don't have data from back then for line drive percentage, but if we look at Wyatt's batting average on balls in play, we see that it was a total outlier season for him, 233 versus a career 272. That year's A's team was not very good defensively, so this is probably just a season-long run of good luck for Wyatt, who was a solid reliever throughout a 9-year career. Bill Henry, the guy with the second most homers given up by a full-time reliever. In 1959 for the Cubs, he gave up 19 homers in 134 innings, a 1.3 home run per 9. But he offset that by striking out a lot of guys and avoiding walks to post 4.4 WAR. Josh Hader. Hader similarly gave up a lot of home runs in 2019, 15 in just 75 innings for a whopping 1.8 per 9, but he also struck out a ridiculous 138 for a 16.4 K per 9. That will work. Frank Smith, 1954. Generic name guy Frank Smith put up a pretty similar season to John Wyatt's. High homer rate, high walk rate, low strikeout rate, and yet a 3-WAR season with a solid 2.67 ERA. But like Wyatt, Smith's batting average on balls in play was flukily low that year at .201, despite the Reds not being particularly good defensively. Okay, there we go. This is a team that will never hit any homers, but give up a ton of them, while probably winning a lot of games. Thanks for watching, and let us know what other weak guys we missed.
Yeah,